Hello, this is Ryan Ellis here for See Detroit Like I Do, doing your slideshow narration for the week of Saturday, August the 26th, 2017, Anno Domini in the year of our Lord. This was for Detroit Street Photography Session number 80. I was out between the hours of 9:40 in the morning and between 9 p.m. and 10 p.m. at least 10 hours out in the city, taking 947 pictures, 100 of which were keepers, and about a dozen or so videos. Now, I aim to take 100 photos an hour and have overall at least 10% of my photos being usable, and on this day out in the city I took just about that many photos an hour and had over 10%, about 10.5% of my photos were good. So just barely passing grade there, according to my own standards. Good day. I started the day with my buddy Omar. I'm sorry. I ended the day with my buddy Omar, my new friend, and started the day with my getting to be less than new, but we're still know each other very briefly. I'll just call him Roy. So, started out in Greektown, met up with my buddy Roy. Roy is had sort of a hippie lifestyle, grew up in, lived for a while in Ashbury Park in California, the sort of the Greenwich Village, you might say, of the hippie world, the cultural, creative, just nucleus of the whole hippie movement, at least in the West, there in America. Claimed to be personal friends with Timothy Leary, went to a bunch of Grateful Dead shows in the late 60s, Mama Bear, Papa Bear, if you know what those are, then you probably know Roy or know about what he lived through. Just crazy life. The guy's traveled the world again and again and again. Tells stories like, just left and right. He's like, he keeps saying, he's like, no one will believe me, Ryan. No one will believe me. I always want to write a book, but no one will believe me. I'm like, well, just lay it on me. Don't stop. I'm fascinated by this guy's life, and he just has stories, and he likes photography. So, and we've been biking the past couple weeks, taking pictures, biking, talking. Just a nice little arrangement. So here he is. Here's Roy, on his bike. Yes, he's in tie-dye. A guy who lived through the 60s is wearing tie-dye. I know, you would never believe. So here is this a wonderful local photographer, shot the Pope, shot Bill and Hillary Clinton, the three tenors, and the list goes on, Mother Teresa. Wonderful guy. I asked his advice one day. I said, I'm just kind of a snot-nosed photographer. What advice do you have? He's like, is that a digital camera you have there? I said, yes, sir. He's like, well, being that you can fit hundreds, if not thousands, depending on how you arrange it, photos on there, just take more photos. He's like, if I were you, if I had that at your age, he's like, instead of like 24, 36 shots to a roll, 12, he's like, I'd be taking shots left and right. He's like, you will improve much if you do that. And so I have, and so I stop by whenever I see him and just say hello, because he's a great inspiration to my life. Speaking of inspiration, my the look I was going for today, you might say, was more of a look. And what I mean by that, I should say my gear I shot with today was my 24 2.8 Nikon Nikkor lens from 1971, my 17 millimeter f3.5 Tokina lens from 1979, and then finally my glorious 50mm f1.4 Nikon Nikkor lens from 1977. Now, this is what it looks like with the aperture wide open. Now, here's the aperture all the way closed. Now, usually I shoot with it wide open. This gives you nice background blur, bigger hole lets in more light, so you can have a faster shutter speed. Now, when you slow down the aperture, when you stop it down, making the hole smaller, you have to have a not as fast of a shutter speed, and then you lose your background blur. You basically have everything in focus, or if you have it halfway stopped all the way down, maybe almost everything in focus. Well, I like keeping things simple, and just to have one thing to focus on, literally and figuratively, and everything else is blurred, literally and figuratively. That's the way I like to do my photography. Shoot with a wide open aperture, only one thing in focus, everything else in glorious blur. Well, today I narrowed it all the way down, or halfway down, between f8 and f16, forcing myself to include all of the yucky, icky, not so pretty looking things in the background of my photos, which made me, instead of having to think of one thing for all the photos, I would have to think of potentially 1,000 things. Not that I could wrap my brain around it, but just, it was a much greater challenge to have a narrower aperture. So I put myself through those. Now, while we were out, my buddy Roy came upon someone who was kind of handing out flyers and trying to sell a little newspaper, actually, clippings. They were a socialist in name and probably a communist in practice for their organization. And I'm not going to try to get too political, but there was a point when my friend said, I like what you guys are about, but you're not willing to be radical enough. And the person kind of leaned into him and said, how do you know we're not? Kind of implying that they might be up to some less than optically optimal practices. And it kind of broke my heart. And truth be told, no matter what side of the political aisle they're on, it would have broken my heart, because when I do photography, this is week number 80. I am in it for the long haul. I am playing the long and the slow game. I'm very methodical. All my superscript dots are above my eyes. I try to be above board, and because that's where I find myself in life. I'm trying to do photography, and so I don't want to cut corners. So when I see someone in the political realm, and especially that, because those are public servants, or better use of the word servant is actually slave. These are people who dedicate their lives to the betterment of their fellow man, and to see that they're so, and even almost like laughing, glorying in it, willing to cut corners, always breaks my heart. That was a long rant there. This guy, he's the postman for my old job, so I stopped and said hello. I was actually kind of surprised to see him, because the last time I saw him several months ago, I think it was last fall, he's like, yeah, I'm going to retire in like a couple weeks, so this is the last time we're going to talk. I said, okay. And, I wished him well, happy retirement. Well, here he is. I'm like, what happened? He's like, money talks. So I took his picture and gave him my card. I said, I'll send you the shots. So yeah, here Roy and I rode around, took pictures of the street art, and it was a nice time. I think we're gonna be for the foreseeable future riding out just about every week together. The guy is full of stories. Traveled the world several times over. He's got tales to tell. So after Roy and I were done hanging out, my new assistant, Omar, showed up. Omar, I met him last week. He had a camera. I said, "What, you a photographer?" He's like, "Yeah, how'd you guess?" I'm like, "Yeah, just, shot in the dark." And I said, "Hey, how about you come shoot with me?" And sure enough, he did. And I was honored and surprised. And he's a quiet kid, but as the phrase goes, still waters run deep. And I sense that there's a lot of sensibility to this young man, and I think because he seems to be so attuned to everything around him, I think he'll make for a really good photographer, because you kind of have to be aware of your surroundings, and he seems to be very aware, more than I am actually, which isn't hard, but like even more than most people, I would further clarify. So this is the time when he joined me on my little shoot, and we walked around, took him to all the galleries, introduced him to all the people I can introduce him to, just because it's nice to know people. I kept telling him, which is true. Now here's an example of the struggle of a photographer. I was supposed to take this guy's picture. I actually volunteered. I was walking by and some random guy said, "Hey, you're photographers. Take pictures in here." I said, "Okay." And then, long story short, the guy who pulled me off the side of the street introduced me to this guy. This guy's the owner. And I said, "All right, well, you're the owner, so let me take your picture." And so I took his picture, and it was gonna be like an easy in and out thing, but just I was having trouble. Like these shots are a little bit blurry. They're a little too dark or too light. They're never really like on the money. And I was so frustrated because I was turning. This is an analog camera, but I was turning my camera to the back to show him how the pictures are coming out, and they weren't coming out. I'm like, Drat. You can't. It's difficult to make up an excuse at that point. I was trying to get his eyes to look like he was up to no good. I was trying to get his jawline strong. I was trying to get his posture perfect, and get him in focus and get a good exposure. There's a lot going on in my mind. And here I see the background. I don't like the way he's standing against the background. I don't like his collar covering his shirt. Perfectionist, I know, but when you're a photographer, you got a lot of stuff you're working through in the moment. And they say any football coach worth his salt is basically a motivational speaker, and I think a photographer becomes that many times, especially with people, where they have to bring that exterior energy to the person. If they're not drawing from their own wells. Now it's so funny. After I'm done taking this man's picture, or around that time, I took, I think, glorious pictures of this complete stranger, not a business owner, not someone who's necessarily going to give me jobs in the future. Why does it have to work that way so often? I take wonderful pictures of a guy who's probably never going to want me to be hired for anything, and then I can't take a halfway decent shot of a person I really want to, see a future to work with. Now this guy, his name's Al. Now this was the highlight / low light of the day. Let's go back to the best picture. Where is it? Right there. Wait. There we go. So this is Al. He's a photographer. And I was walking by, I see a cute dog, I see a happy man, I say, "Hey, can I take your picture?" So I start snapping away. We start talking about photography. He's like, he knows my gear pretty well. I'm like, not only are you a photographer, you kind of, you have some wisdom, some real experience, more than most, or at least you're able to express it so clearly. And so we had this conversation, and when I meet photographers in Detroit, I can't help it. I have to ask them a question. I say, "Do you know Bill Rauhauser, the dean of Detroit photography, the guy I've been shooting since the 1940s until the present time, 98 years old?" "Yes, he's a very close friend. I think he might have even said best friend." I'm like, man, like they to the point they would go out and get food and hang out all the time. In fact, for a while, I think he said every week. And he dropped some very sad news. He said Bill Rauhauser, he said he died 3 weeks ago on a platform, taking a picture of his favorite model named Cinnamon. Never had good balance, fell off the platform, hit his head wet, went to the hospital, and they had to pull the plug. And he's like, I was there, Cinnamon was there, his, blood was there, his family. Very sad. Bill Rauhauser is my hero. He's the guy for me in Detroit. I've taken the same pictures that he's taken by design. I never credited them as this is completely is my thing, but yeah. And even when I taught, I would pass on appreciation of this man to my students, day after day. So what are the odds? My hero, a good friend of my hero. I ran into this person, and they were the one to tell me that Mr. Rauhauser passed on. But Al here was a very gracious other side of the conversation person, conversationalist. He he's hopefully gonna maybe we'll grab lunch sometime and talk, talk shop, maybe even shoot. I would love to shoot with that man. But that was the sad news of the day, that one of my heroes just passed away. I never even got to shake his hand. In fact, I have a joke. Whenever I see people that knew Bill Rawhauser, I always shake their hand and I tell them I shook the hand. I shook the hand of the man that shook the hand of Rawhauser. Now this is one of my favorite shots of the day. I'm not sure how well it's going to age because it's not perfectly in focus and the exposure could be a little brighter. But I love it's. I wouldn't. Yeah, you might call that environmental portrait because these are street performers in Detroit and that's the environment in which they find themselves in. It's a nice wide shot and they're not too big in it. There's a lot around them. Your eye can move about the scene. It's not a perfect picture, but it's a very good picture. One of my top 10 of the day, in fact. But yes, winding down the photos. Now here are all the shots I took on my 600, I think. My wider, yep. My wider lens camera. So you're going to see a lot of repeats just with a different lens, different camera. Now, the past several months I've shot with 55-1.2, 55-2.8 micro, and the 24-2.8. And now, because the 55, that's what you call like a normal millimeter, like normal focal length. Normal meaning it lines up with kind of the same focal length through which our eyes see. Now, I've moved away from the seeing things as the eyes see to having double the space in an image. 24 millimeters gives you double the space from the normal 50, and this 17 millimeter gives you just that much more than the human eye or this 50 would see. So the past several weeks and probably for a while, I'm going to be using the 17, the 24, and this 50. My aesthetics are sort of lately kind of leaning towards I'm loving how much you can fit into a wide angle lens or ultra wide. And here's a prime example: the man and his two dogs. All that for that. Forgive me. And the street art, Henry the Hatter. Like it just makes sense to have a wide lens in your arsenal, especially if you can pony up for prime. Now I've said so many times before, and I'll say it again. A lot of my photos I take when I'm out in Detroit, I would consider sketches. Like I know they're not perfect, but this is what I could come up with, at the time, and I'm hoping to improve in the future. And going to this new skate park that just popped up in downtown, that is exactly what I'm doing. I'm trying to figure out how do I take a picture of a skateboarder. Just like how I'm, figuring out how to take a picture using a narrow aperture, which I should say was limited basically to the bright parts of the day. When it got dark, a narrow aperture wasn't really gonna fly with my camera settings being manageable according to my present skill level. But yes, here are a bunch of repeat shots, just kind of variations because they're shot different lens, different camera. So yes, this was my day in Detroit. That's all the photos. That's all, folks. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please pray for me. I will pray for you. If you like what you see here, consider supporting me on Patreon. Patreon.com/SeeDetroit like I do. Of course, if you like these videos, subscribe to me on YouTube. Subscribe to my channel. I don't have a formal URL for it. I need to hit a certain subscriber number before I can customize that, but you're here on my channel, so hit the subscribe button, hit the notification button on top of it while you're there. Have a good day. Thank you for watching this video. I wish you well. Au revoir.